of that is restoration of the rights of felons, which is interesting. I was trying to figure out what a Second Amendment's lawyer would do. Now I know. And he also has a general practice and owns a gun store. What's the name of the gun store?
Defensive Tactics.
Defensive Tactics.
Yep.
That's a very nice.
Last year. Thank you.
You have a special?
My kids, thank you.
Is it Virginia Beach?
Yeah.
And today he's going to talk to us about ballet, which is one of his great interests. No, I just. Come on.
Let's hear it for Tim Anderson. Come on.
So my name's Tim Anderson. I'm an attorney in Virginia Beach. I would have told you 2 months ago that if somebody would have said I'd be speaking in front of this group or any group that they were crazy. Things have happened very quick in my life in this, and there's a very familiar face in this room, and if you don't know who that is, Vincent Smith is one of the other tremendous pioneers of the Second Amendment efforts. So essentially, here is where how I have developed my my standing right now and why I'm here before you. So I've had a Facebook page forever, and at my law firm I've made videos about that. And over the 20 years I have developed about 10 or 15,000 people, and it was very common that if I would make a video about bankruptcy or felon restoration of rights, people would watch the videos maybe 500, 600 times, and I'd be pretty excited about that. You know, 600 people are watching what I'm talking about. Pretty excited. So when the Democrats won everything and we caught the blue flu in November, I started saying, you know what, I'm going to start paying attention to what they're saying, because I've really never paid attention to it, to state government and what they do too much, but lawyers go to seminars after the laws are passed so that we know what happened and we can adjust our practices and explain to the people. But I thought, you know, I'm going to start looking at this. And so I started looking at how they were pre-filing bills. And one of the very first pre-filed bills, which I'm sure everybody in here knows about, is Senate Bill 16. And about 3.5, 4 weeks ago, I started talking about Senate Bill 16 and the dangers of what that bill would propose if it were to pass as law. At the same time, guys like Vincent Smith and others were doing the same thing. And so we have these like unorganized collective groups of people that are starting to build followings and individuals on Facebook. So I started commenting on these videos and I would do this law and this law and this law, and then one day I did 4 in one day where I was driving across the western part of the state talking about all the different laws that are being proposed. So my Facebook following went from 600 to videos being watched 20,000 times, 30,000 times. And now where we are today, in the past 28 days, we have 1 million people. And so, in 1 month. And so I've gone from this little local attorney to kind of this more broader voice. So now that I'm every day talking about the Second Amendment and talking about what's happening in Richmond, I'm much more closely paying attention to what our elected officials are saying. Now, Senate Bill 16 was written by a guy named Saslaw. He's a senator in the 35th District up in Fairfax. Now, he's been in office for 40 years, okay? He's 79, 80 years old. He's been in office for a long time. And so he is actually now the Senate Majority Leader for the Virginia Senate. So Senate Bill 16, in a very, very brief nutshell, basically says this. We're going to classify certain weapons as prohibited weapons. They're going to call them assault weapons in Virginia, but we're going to make those prohibited weapons. And it's going to be a class of firearms that are commonly owned by a lot of people, especially in Hampton Roads. AR-15s by far would be one of those types of, but there's many, many more. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, here, we're going to make these weapons prohibited. They're going to be illegal to own after the effective date, and then you'll have 2 choices in Virginia. One, you will have to evacuate your firearm out of Virginia by selling it or getting rid of it somehow, or you'll have to forfeit it. all right? And that's what the law said. There was no grandfather clause, there was no provision, and if you don't comply, you're going to be a felon on July 1. And so when I start talking about that, and Vincent starts talking about that, people are like, oh my God, what is happening? Not just Republicans, not just Libertarians, but Democrats. Everybody's like, whoa, we're very concerned about people becoming felons who are lawfully owning firearms. All right, so we've been talking about it, and I can get into the minutiae if you want to have a conversation. Vincent can get into that as well. We are very well versed to know about those things if you want to talk about that. But why I'm here right now is I've been talking about it, the numbers are ticking up on the Facebook page. People are very interested. And then all of a sudden, Congressman, then the governor of Virginia, in concert, starts saying, we're talking about confiscation. On the record, he's asked, are you looking at confiscation? He says, I'm talking to my director of public safety about that. He says that on the record. So we have a bill that's going to make people felons, or unless they de facto forfeit their now prohibited weapons. We have the governor who starts talking openly about confiscation. We have an attorney general who says rules are rules and laws are going to be followed no matter what happens. And so then people like Vincent start saying we need Second Amendment sanctuaries, okay? And then they start popping up all over the place. And what's really cool about that movement is everything is unorganized, all right? The Attorney General said, oh, this is just a gun lobby scare tactic. I'll tell you this, not one time have I been approached by any gun lobby. The NRA has never called me. The VCDL has never called me. Nobody has called me about that. And so it's these individuals stepping up and saying, hey, we want some type of a declaration. Well, the problem with the Second Amendment declarations are basically this. We are a Dillon rule in Virginia, which basically means this. When the state makes a law, the city can't make a law that contradicts what the state law says. So if we have a situation that involves, if they say these weapons are prohibited and you can't have them in Virginia, Virginia Beach can't say, well, we're going to make an ordinance that says you can. Okay, so we can't do that. All right, that's prohibited under the way that the rules work in Virginia. But what is happening is that these Second Amendment sanctuaries are popping up and they're sending messages. They're saying, hey, we are very concerned about the constitutionality of these laws. And of the state, about 100 jurisdictions in Virginia have got on board. Now, somebody said something today, which is an interesting point, there's only about 110, so it sounds like a lot of jurisdictions are on board, but the big problem is that the big population centers haven't signed off. So we've got 100 jurisdictions, but maybe only about half the state by population have actually come on. Fairfax, Virginia Beach, Richmond, the big cities have not come on to these kinds of resolutions yet. So anyway, so that's where we are right now. So we have these non-binding resolutions that say the cities and localities in Virginia are concerned. So then, in response to that, in response to 100 jurisdictions stepping up and saying, hey, we're declaring ourselves a constitutional city or a Second Amendment sanctuary or something like that, Congressman McEachin from Chesapeake says, I think that the governor should deploy the National Guard if the local police don't enforce the laws that Richmond imposes. He says that. He says, I'm not the governor, but the governor should, I think the governor could and maybe should do that. So when that happened, it became clear to me that what is happening is Congressman McEachin was not saying that on his own. This is a RICO conspiracy between our elected, this reads like a RICO conspiracy, okay? So you have the governor saying something, talking about confiscation, you have the Senate leader making a bill that is essentially de facto confiscation. You have the Attorney General who's not coming out and saying, hey, these bills are a little sketchy, we're going to look at them, but he's saying laws will be followed. You have a congressman now talking about the National Guard. I said, you know what, somebody's got to do something. And nobody's doing anything, right? We're all just sitting around and we're unorganized and we are not in a position of anybody taking it to them, taking the fight to them. So I said last Friday, not yesterday, but the Friday before, I said I'm going to start a recall petition against Senator Saslaw in his home district. In his home district, that's 85% Democrat, okay? So in order to do a recall petition under state law, this is how it works. You have to have 10% of the vote of the voters have to recall him. So you all can't sign that, okay? It has to be people from the 35th district. His voters have to recall him. So when we go up there and we look at the numbers. The numbers are about 40,000 people voted in 2019, and he got 35,000 of them because he was unopposed. And there's like 5,000 people that wrote in somebody else's name. Anyway, you got 40,000 people. So that's 4,000 signatures we need from the 35th district to start the recall process. Okay, and in order to get that, we really need about 7,000 signatures because unfortunately they have to be registered voters, they have to live in the 35th, and I don't know if you've seen my Facebook video, but the 35th is this weird jack-legged thing where some of it's in Falls Church, some of it's in Alexandria, some of it's it's all over the place. And so somebody may live in Alexandria but not live in the 35th. And so anyway, so you got to get about 7,000 votes. Now that's, or 7,000 voters to sign your petition. That's a big ask in Super Democrat blue 35th. So I said, all right, Facebook, I'm going to be at the Fairfax County Courthouse. This is Friday last week, so I'm going to be at the Fairfax County Courthouse Sunday night at 6 p.m. If you want to be a part of this, show up, okay? The next day, Saturday morning, I got a phone call, a very life-changing phone call from the State Libertarian Party of Virginia. Not Virginia Beach or Fairfax, but the State Libertarian Party. And I don't know if you know Bo, but Bo is the guy, okay? He's the main guy for your party. And he called me and he said, we want this. We want to do this. This is the right thing to stand for liberty. We change laws when it comes to elections. We want to be a part of this. And I said, great, because I have no idea what I'm doing. I wrote the petition and I alleged all the facts of why he should be recalled. And I said, perfect. So I went to Fairfax. About 70 people showed up, which is amazing. Yeah. It was cold. We were outside. It was in the dark, and about 70 people showed up. And every one of them were either Republicans or Democrats who have both said, we have no voice in this district. Nobody is here. Nobody is running. We have no voice. And what I also learned is that Senator Saslaw had his first primary in 2019 in 40 years. First time somebody's primaried him, and he almost lost. In fact, more people voted against him because there were 3 candidates. So if you add the other 2 up, more people voted against him than for him in the 35th. And then I learned he's not very well liked. And I'm like, whoa, well maybe this isn't as big of a task as we thought.
Maybe it's because he's a complete asshole.
John, he's a business.
So here's the then there's the Northern Virginia Libertarian Party is there as well. He shows up. His name is Theo. Theo's there, and he's talking about what the Libertarian Party can do, and ballot access is a big thing for the Libertarians. You guys have to go every election and get signatures. Every election to get ballot access. Republicans don't have to do that. Democrats don't have to do that, but the Libertarians do. And they're like, we know how to do this. We have the people that can do this. And so I went to meet with the party, the state party on Monday with the petition. We modified it. We've changed it around because they have a little different methodology than what I have, but it's their petition now. And I said, well, what do we have to do? We have to raise $20,000. Okay, we got to raise $20,000. All right, and so I found this out on Monday this week, Monday, that we need $20,000. And the reason we need the money is because they have to hire people to go door to door to do this. While volunteers can do this, the idea is that to get 6,000 people in a hostile district, you need professionals. Okay, so they got to fly people in. There's a guy that just worked for Tulsi Gilbert in Hawaii who's coming in, and so they need these people to be a part of this. And so I said $20,000. Okay, so on Monday I put up a call to action on Facebook and I said we need $20,000, and today we've got almost $11,000.
Wow.
All right, from people who have donated. 200 plus people have donated little money. I'm saying 20, 50 bucks, whatever you're going to do, throw it into the pot. And we have over about $11,000. Now, if you go to the lpv.org page, they have a Recall Saslaw link on there. You can look at it right now, and you can see where we're at. I'm not exactly sure where we're at. We're pretty. I know we're over 10,000 for sure. That has thrown in money to this cause. Okay, and so we have at Christmas time we have raised $10,000 plus, which I don't know if you know much about the Libertarian Party, but that's a big thing. Okay, that doesn't happen much in this organization, from what I understand. It's not people don't give money like that very quickly. What the Libertarian Party promised, and a lot of people were concerned is, hey, I don't want to be a part of this group. I don't want people to use our money, use my money for some other agenda. And so they even agreed, if you donate on this page, it will be earmarked just for Saslaw. So that's why the Republicans are donating. That's why the Democrats are donating. That's why you're seeing money flowing in that we're going to have it. So now we have half the money in 1 week that we need, and now it's just a matter of kind of pushing it over the top. All right, here's the legal argument that you have to make once you get the signatures. The signatures are step one. Okay, a judge has to order recall of the senator, and what the judge has to order is that he did something that was a misuse of his office, okay? Not just a misuse of his office, but the misuse of his office, it impacts the ability for him to continue his function. Now, there's only been 2 cases in Virginia that have even talked about this that you can read about. The first one is a clerk out in the western part of the state, a clerk of court, who fired half of her staff after an election one year because they didn't support her, okay? So she had all these clerks, and they didn't support her, so she's like, y'all are fired, I'm going to hire people that will support me next time. So they did a recall petition against her. The problem with that petition is that there wasn't enough signatures that were sworn under the penalties of perjury. So the court laid out a little bit of guidelines of the things we have to do. The voters have to swear to the penalties of perjury. The second and only other published recall petition efforts that are in the that's been in Virginia is Burford in Norfolk, okay, the treasurer who's just walked into federal prison. So as he's walking into federal prison, he is, they're suspending him from the treasurer job, okay, so that's it. That's all there is. There's no definition of what misuse is. What the Libertarian Party is going to argue is that because Senator Saslaw proposed a bill, a radical bill, that would have criminalized, by all accounts, over 100,000 people in Virginia, make them felons. There's at least known 100,000 people in Virginia that have what would be considered prohibited weapons. There's probably much, much more than that, okay? Because he did that, and because he did it in such a manner that the only way to comply was confiscation or having to divest yourself of the firearm, that because he did that, and that resulted in all of these cities and counties having to come together in an emergency basis, that has created a public panic amongst lawful firearm owners. Okay, we're not talking about illegal, people committing crimes. We're talking about people who lawfully own firearms are now looking at the possibility of becoming a felon. That in concert with the Attorney General never once saying, hey, I'm a little concerned about this bill too, I'm going to give my input here. Never once has the governor said anything like that. What he says is confiscation. And then you have a U.S. congressman saying, if the police aren't going to enforce it, we should call in the National Guard. It has created a panic in Virginia. And that, the Libertarian Party argues, is a abuse and misuse of his office. It's like a conspiracy. It's a RICO conspiracy amongst all of these officials where they are just escalating and escalating and escalating. Now, the governor, about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, came out and said, oh, by the way, there was going to be a grandfather clause, okay? Oops, sorry, we forgot that. After 100 of the jurisdictions popped that up, we always meant for that to be in there, but there's going to be a registration, okay? Now, the problem with registration is you got a governor saying, I'm looking at confiscation. So let's tell the governor where our guns are, and then that is going to make it pretty easy for the Gestapo to come and find your firearms, right? And so it's this unbelievable Tom Clancy story. I mean, it is outrageous what is happening with the governor. And so then the governor, after all of that, he says there is no bill that, and this was in the article yesterday that was in the that you all have been looking at. He says there is no bill that results in confiscation of firearms. There's no bill that results in people, we're not trying to take people's guns. It's all a lie, okay? And so what the idea is this, is that if we can get the signatures in Fairfax, and we can take it to the Senate leader, okay? Not some freshman talking off the cuff, okay? The Senate leader, and say that it is a misuse of your office to propose a bill that would make hundreds, maybe hundreds of thousands of Virginians felons. That is a misuse of your office, and I get how the bills work. You know, a bunch of bills get filed and it all gets mixed up into the equation and all of that, but it is a misuse of your office to even say it, okay? Because you are an elected official, you represent the people of Virginia, not just one political party or Mr. Bloomberg. You represent this. And Senate Bill 16 goes further than any firearm restriction bill in the United States.
Wow.
More than California, more than New York, more than New Jersey. It goes further than all of those things. It would make Virginia the most restrictive firearm state in the nation if it were to pass. It was by design, and it was there. And instead of the governor giving us some reassurance of, hey, we're going to soften this down, instead of the Attorney General doing that, they're saying laws will be followed. And then the congressman says, and if they're not followed, if the locals truly aren't going to do it, we'll call in the National Guard. So that's where we are. That's where the Saslaw recall effort is. We're taking it to them in his district for two reasons. One, what he did was wrong. Okay, you are an elected official. You know, this has never happened in history. Republicans have never come in and taken power and tried to make hundreds of thousands of Democrats felons overnight. This has never happened. So to do that is a misuse of your office. And then secondly, for the rest of them up there, maybe they'll think about it, okay? Maybe they'll think about it. Because there are other bills that are equally egregious, but Senate Bill 16 is by far the worst one, okay, of them all. There's plenty of them. So that's kind of where the Libertarian Party is. That is rolling out today. Boots are going on the ground in Fairfax today. We have almost a little bit more than 10 grand, so they're starting to bring these people in. People are flying in, and this is where it's all going. So that is that part of the equation. The second part of the equation, which I brought up in Suffolk the other night, is this: we're having trouble with places like Virginia Beach and Hampton, which are more Democrat controlled type of in the councils. Is that they're not doing anything to declare Second Amendment sanctuaries. And the truth is that every city and county in Virginia is a Second Amendment sanctuary. That's the facts. Every county is. We have the Second Amendment, and we have Article 1, Section 13 of the Virginia Constitution. The bill, we already are Second Amendment sanctuaries. Asking them to simply reaffirm that is all that you're saying is like, hey, you guys realize, somebody said this from the VCDL the other night. He said, what if they came up and they said slavery's legal? Okay, we're going to be allowed to have slaves again this year. What would you enforce that? Would you enforce, black people being rounded up and having to go work on plantations for free? Of course not. You wouldn't wait for a court to say that's not legal. You would say, no, we're not going to do that. So what you're asking the locals to do is say, this is outrageous. You don't need a court to step in and say making somebody a felon is because they own a gun that they legally bought. You don't need the courts to say that. That's outrageous. It's not as outrageous as slavery, but it's like that. Okay, it's outrageous. And so so that is what we are talking about. And so what I started in Suffolk was this. As I said, let's speak to them in a language that they understand, okay? They may not like the sanctuary language, they may not like it, but let's speak to them in a language they understand, which is money. How much is it going to cost the locals to enforce the laws? And when we did the math in Suffolk, there's about 6,300 people in Suffolk that would be considered felons under the law. That would cost the city of Suffolk $250 million to arrest, prosecute, and put them in jail. If they could even find a jail that could hold them, because there's not enough room in the Western Tidewater Regional Jail to put 6,300 people in there. So where's the money? And so the argument now is that I'm shifting is we've made our point that Second Amendment, that we want some reassurance here. But where's the money from Richmond to follow through with the laws? And if you don't have the money, how can the locals carry that burden? The city of Suffolk has a $9 million surplus this year. How are they going to carry a $250 million burden without Richmond kicking it in? And so those are, that's the arguments that I'm trying to shift now. I'm going back to the same cities that have declared Second Amendment sanctuaries and ask them to propose a fiscal responsibility resolution that says, okay, we'll enforce your laws, Richmond, if that's what you want, but you're going to have to pay for it. We can't afford to pay. We can't afford to lock up that. And that doesn't even cover the economic cost of what the tax base will be from losing 6,300 people in Suffolk who aren't going to pay taxes anymore because they're going to be in prison. It is an unbelievable thing. And so when you really start talking about money, you get their attention. And get this, Hampton, who blew us off, I wrote the resolution, I sent it to him, I got an email from them yesterday that said, we're very interested in this. And so shifting the conversation to money makes a lot more sense to these locals. And and it's not giving up on the fight, it's that you can't do this. You can't afford to do this. There's no room to put all these people in jail. The economic cost would be devastating to the localities. But secondly, it's clearly it's not right. So anyway, I want to tell you this, the Libertarian Party stepped up on their own. I didn't ask, they came to me, and you gotta be truly blessed to be a part of this organization, because they're going to change history because of this petition. Because the legislatures do not fear the voters. Okay? They don't fear the voters, especially like the trans up in Northern Virginia who say that you should be able to abort a child up until moments of its birth. She has no recourse because their voters are going to keep voting her in. Sasla has no recourse. Well, that's going to change because of the Libertarian Party. It is amazing what your organization has getting itself into. So for those reasons, this should be a day where you could proudly call yourselves a libertarian, because you are on the right side of history when it comes to this. So at that is where I am. If you have questions, I'll be happy to answer them and do the best I can. All right, well, let's just go around the room. How about that? Go ahead.
This is a little bit more of a statement. I think we need to stay vigilant and strong and not back off on this at all. You even said it a minute ago that you were hoping it was, or you said something about soften up the law. He put this and said we're going to confiscate weapons. That's like way at the top. And so now if he backs off and that goes all the way to keeping guns legal, then people are going to say, oh, well, he was going to confiscate him, but he's not going that far. He's still going to do something. So we need to stick to that and stay with it and not let him soften it. It needs to go away.
It would seem to me that if they're going to confiscate my firearms, that is what, Fifth Amendment taking?
Yep, that's what
so you need to compensate me. I've got about $3,000 or $4,000 worth of weapons they'd be wanting to take. I'm sure there's other people in this room got a lot more. Has anybody calculated what it would cost to pay for all of these weapons they want to confiscate?
In the petition, they specifically allege that Senate Bill 16 is a violation of the Fifth Amendment. It's a taking clause. There's been no provisions in there that deal with how much is that going to, how are we going to compensate the people. There's no provisions. And in fact, the fiscal impact study for Senate Bill 16 says $50,000. Okay, $50,000. Now it costs $100 a day to put somebody in jail. Okay, so if you put one person in jail for 1 year, that's $35,000. So they say $50,000, and the reason they say that is they have no idea. It would be absolutely unconstitutional for the state to come in and take your firearms. Democrat, Republicans, everybody would agree to this. It would be unconstitutional for them to take your firearms without compensation. And that's called a buyback in most states. That's what are called buybacks.
$2-3 billion statewide?
And they don't have it. The state doesn't have it. Go ahead.
I'm with the Virginia Tea Party Federation, and we're going to back you. I'll have a special call tomorrow, ask for a special conference, and we're going to see what we can do, because this is a constitutional crisis.
Yes.
On the recall matter, we have the proud Portsmouth, the city of Portsmouth has the proud reputation of being the only city to not only recall once, but recall twice a sitting mayor successfully.
Right.
We attempted a third time with Mayor Wright, a third mayor. And we submitted it, but that didn't go through, but we got rid of him anyway. So there is a precedent, and it doesn't have to be illegal stuff. But in this case, we're talking illegal stuff. The Supreme law of the land is the Constitution. So Fourth Amendment, due process, all of this thing is in violation. You can see it. It's codified in the what they've submitted to be law. So I think there is something that you can do on those fronts.
Let me just address that for one point, because that's a very good point that he makes. Let me tell you about Portsmouth. Portsmouth is a unique place that is not like Virginia. Okay, Portsmouth has in its city charter that you can recall an elected official just on votes. Okay, but it is just in Portsmouth. That is not how it works in the rest of the state. That's because it's in their charter. So in Portsmouth, if you don't like your council member, you can go do a recall, and if you get the requisite number of signatures, they're out, and there's a new election in Portsmouth. That's how they've done that. The rest of the state, you have to get the signatures, and you have to get the judge to find cause. Now, I will also tell you this, before you jump on, hey, this is the rallying thing. Never has it happened in Virginia that any person has ever been recalled judicially. Okay, it's a big deal. It's never happened. People have tried, and many people have failed. And so this is a very foreign and hostile environment to go into with the courts. The courts don't like the idea. But unfortunately, it's not like Portsmouth where you just have to get the signatures. Okay? So,
One last point.
Sure.
One last point. This is historic, what's happening now. And because we have been so successful, we're at 111 cities and counties. And Chesapeake put in the gold standard of constitutional city resolution. That can be something that will move the other cities to go ahead and adopt it, because we had the city attorney bulletproof it. So that may be digestible to Virginia Beach and maybe Suffolk. But here's the thing, because that this has been going on for 5 weeks, and because the players like you are now starting to become noticeable, the whole nation is watching, and the discussion is becoming more intense. So we are making history.
That's right.
We may not know it, but we're making history.
Lobby Day, Martin Luther King's birthday. We anticipate thousands of people on the Capitol Square. There will be the VCDL rally. Are you scheduled to speak?
I haven't been asked.
All right. Call Philip Van Cleve and see if you can get yourself on the agenda.
I saw him in Suffolk the other day, and he's still,
Working on it.
yeah.
That's
Go ahead.
What I find mind-boggling is that I don't know how long Ms. Saslaw's been an elected official,
40 years.
that he would actually propose such a wide encompassing bill to just, I imagine he's done it before. I don't think this is the first time.
Yeah, he's done it before, but the Republicans have been in charge, so it was never a threat.
Right, but the point is that we're sending people, not we, but the royal we, collective we, are sending people to our General Assembly that are proposing unconstitutional bills.
That's right.
And I find that outrageous.
Oh, and you know what? I left out one additional point, and this, if this doesn't infuriate you, please, this is so important, I forgot this. So after the governor says, we're going to have a registration and there's a grandfather clause, Senator Saslaw says, I never intended on Senate Bill 16 becoming the main law for assault weapons bans. After all the counties have stood up and said this is crazy and everybody's talking about how unconstitutional it is, he says, I never intended that from happening. And what was the point of proposing the bill? That is a misuse of office. Because if I yell fire and you all run out the door and there's no fire, there's a consequence to that. You don't get to do that in a movie theater. I'm taking my kid to see Star Wars today. If I yell fire in the movie theater and everybody runs out, I'm gonna get in trouble. And that's what, if it was truly his intention not to make this the bill, then he's just yelled fire and cost hundreds of localities, 100+ localities in Virginia, tons of money to stand up and say, we're not going to stand for this.
Yeah, I have not so much a question, but a commentary on the Attorney General, Herring. He's taken on himself to be an arbiter as to whether this law is going to be constitutional or not, and we should follow the law. But when Virginia passed a law several years back and was appearing in court on a constitutional problem, he did not support the law, which is his job. He was elected as Attorney General of Virginia to uphold Virginia law, and instead he actually went to the other side and filed an amicus brief against the Virginia law. If he couldn't just recuse himself and let someone else in his office represent the state, he basically deprived a legal client of representation, which any person appearing in court or entity is deserving of.
He's done that a couple of times. He's done that with marijuana. I know, there's maybe more of a positive group for marijuana, but he supported the Commonwealth attorneys not enforcing marijuana laws. He supported the state on, he opposed the state on their gay rights stats that they had back before those lights were legal. So he has taken many positions that are not consistent with what the Attorney General is supposed to do. He's supposed to represent the law. The legislature's proposed laws. It's the legislature who makes the laws and the Attorney General who enforces them. And so he has, in multiple occasions, gone against what the legislature's rules are, which is inconsistent with what the Attorney General will be doing. Go ahead.
I'd like to follow up on Leslie's question about cause. You said that making what was legal illegal is cause for Saslaw's recall.
To propose a bill that would say that hundreds of thousands of Virginians would be felons if they don't forfeit their weapons, right, that would be a misuse of his office. Right. Either that or him saying, I didn't ever intend for this bill to become the law. One or the other. It's an alternative argument.
But what about the Constitution? Why isn't that injected? Why isn't the violation of the Second Amendment just of itself saying that sufficient?
Everyone wants to stick around for a couple minutes and I can break that question down.
Sure.
Okay. So in Virginia, we have the Federal Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. Okay, that is the highest court in Virginia on the federal side, right below the Supreme Court. So the whole country has these courts of appeals. You've probably a lot heard of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals out of California. But we have the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. So the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals 2 years ago ruled in a case called Colby versus Hagan. And the Colby versus Hagan case affirmed the Maryland assault weapons ban, okay? And so Virginia has kind of free reign to make certain rules and regulations that are consistent with making firearms illegal because Colby versus Hagan is the law of Virginia. If we run to court, if they make an assault weapons ban and we run to court and say this isn't legal, you can't make people out of felons overnight, you can't do that, Colby versus Hagan says you can because they've reaffirmed the Maryland law which does that. Now, there is a case before the United States Supreme Court right now. It's called Warman versus Healy, and Warman versus Healy deals with the Massachusetts assault weapons ban, and it interprets an earlier case called Heller versus D.C., which gives us the right to own and possess firearms. Justice Scalia and Heller said that we're not allowed to own weapons that are unusual or military grade, like tanks and M16s. And so since he said that, the courts of appeals have split these things like AR-15s are military grade weapons. they've done that. And so that's how we've evolved to where we are. It's very possible Warman versus Healy is going to be heard by the Supreme Court. The last brief was filed yesterday, and it is very possible they're going to hear that and they're going to definitively answer. Now, just 2 years ago, the Supreme Court said that we can own stun guns under the Second Amendment. And so, there was this argument that the Second Amendment only meant muskets. Well, they said we can own stun guns pursuant to the Second Amendment. So that went all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States. So there's this evolution of law. But to your question, sir, the issue is that there's no backstop in the courts for us right now with the Colby case. And so that's why, unless Mormon versus Healy comes down and puts an end to this, that's why our better argument is always going to be on the funding side, because they can't fund it. The locals can't fund it.
What's the,
Sort of answered my question.
take away from the case in California that just came?
Oh, yeah.
The magazine ban thing.
So in California, 20 years after the high-capacity magazines happened in California, finally a federal court has come in and said that's not legal. One federal district court in San Diego found that. That's on appeal to the Ninth Circuit. We'll see how that goes. But he basically said, there's no basis for high-capacity magazine. There's a lot more empirical data that people with magazines that have higher capacities are able to better defend themselves. Keep this one statistic in mind, okay, when you hear about the gun crisis statistics. There was an article that was written that talked about the Attorney General. It says 10,000 people died by gunfire since 2007. Okay, here's the real numbers. 60% of those were suicides. Okay, so no matter how much your gun holds, you only need one. Okay, so back out 6,000 of those, and you're down to 4,000. Okay, 1/5 of people who have bought guns legally commit crimes, homicidal crimes with firearms. So 1/5 of the population who legally went and got through a background check or did a private party sale, who legally bought it, commit crimes. So that means 20% of 4,000, that's 800 people, okay, in 12 years. That is the true numbers in Virginia of how our gun laws are failing us, okay? Now that's a lot of people, but that is not a lot of people compared to 8.5 million people in the Commonwealth, okay? And so that's something you have to think about.
2 points, and really they're just comments based on what you're saying. One, there's a lot of people who may have only recently heard of Senator Saslaw. The BCDL has been dealing with him for a long time. About a decade ago, matter of fact, it was why I went to my first lobby day in 2009. Was the year before that. Here comes the delegation from the BCO walking down the hall of General Assembly. Everybody's got their orange stickers on. And he says loud enough for everybody near him and everybody in every nearby place to hear, "Here come the Beverly Hillbillies." From an elected official, that's how much disdain and disgust he has for what we're doing. Second of all, the argument that they're making about about whether or not something is military or not. 0 AR-15s have been sent into combat. The after reading the SB-16, that's talking about semi-automatic. The pump, Remington 870, they're not banning it. How many hundreds of thousands of those have been sent into combat? Those truly are weapons of war, if they want to say weapons of war. They have been sent into combat with our troops. 0 AR-15s.
I'll come back to John. Leslie Jones?
Yes. I want to know, I know you say that we're going to get more response for money-wise, but Maryland has its own constitution, am I correct at that?
Yes.
And it's different than the Virginia Constitution, am I correct in that?
Yes.
Will there be any kind of a thing to say that because we are different than Maryland, that the Fourth Court of Appeals would have to deal with that differently?
Well, one of the big things about Maryland is that they had a grandfather clause, and they didn't require registration. And so that is the most unique difference between Senate Bill 16 and Maryland is they allowed people to have, and the grandfather clause, Vincent, because you've said this a lot, has a pass down provision. So the grandfather clause that Northam's talking about, you can't pass them down to your kids. Okay, now Vincent has an amazing talking point. He says, "I'm not going to bargain my children's rights for my rights."
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
and so a grandfather clause doesn't solve the problem. Okay, in any way, because your kids aren't going to be able to go and have the same firearms that you did. But at least what it might be able to do is not make us felons until we can get to the next election, and then hopefully we can take back power. So for that purpose, I think there could be some value to a grandfather
So
clause.
do they, when they say that this is for safety, if they grandfather in, as they're saying they will, doesn't that negate the safety that they're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a false narrative.
Regarding the Colby case in the Fourth Circuit, does that have any effect on a case brought in the state courts under Article 1, Section 13 of the Virginia Constitution?
Well, that hasn't been brought up yet because this was defining a Maryland case. So you're right, Article 1 at Section 13 has a very valid, a little bit different language than the Second Amendment. But what they're going to do is what the federal courts have done is they've created this thing called intermediate scrutiny, strict scrutiny, and what they basically said is that, as simplistic as I can to a room full of non-lawyers, is that if the state can make a compelling argument that it's about public safety, then they can pass any laws that they want. That's essentially the standard of intermediate scrutiny. And that's how this case would be evaluated under the Heller test. Now the issue though is the reason why a lot of these cases have gotten screwed up is because they got screwed up in how they presented the evidence to the court. What needs to be talked about is that in Virginia there was only 343 people who were killed in 2017 by firearms, most from pistols, 8 from rifles, and we don't even know how many of those are AR-15. So that say an AR-15 is causing some type of crisis is just not true. The second thing is they said in Virginia Beach, this is a perfect example of the guy using an AR-15 to shoot the building up. That didn't happen. Okay, it was pistols. And so these are, so what has to happen is right facts have to be put into the case because bad facts make bad law. And what the lawyers aren't doing right in all of these cases is they're not, and I'm not saying I'm an expert on all this stuff, because they're smart too, but they are not getting the facts right. They're letting the talking points in, and they're not safeguarding them so that, and then the courts are like, oh yeah, this is a public safety thing. These firearms are dangerous.
But that's not the question. The question is, does that have the effect on us suing in state court?
No, it does not. It does
Under
not.
our Constitution?
It does not. But there is, the state court is required to follow the United States Supreme Court, okay? And so when the United States, so if we went straight to Virginia, there's two cases. There's the Heller case and the McDonald case. And they set out those kind of standards, that intermediate scrutiny standard. So then what Virginia would have to do is they would have to scrutinize Heller against, because the Virginia Constitution doesn't say we can own, we individuals can own guns. It doesn't say that. Neither does the Second Amendment. It talks about a militia, all right? And it talks about when you read it in that totality. That's why Heller had to come out and say, no, it meant for the people. It meant for the people, not, you don't have to be in a group of a militia. It meant for the people. That wasn't even decided until about 15 years ago when Heller finally came down from the Supreme Court. The way that they wrote it was not like, any individual can own a gun, period. And that right shall not be infringed. That would have been great, but they wrote it in this kind of weird, twisty language, and it took the Supreme Court to rule that we can own that. And that comes from Heller, not from the Constitution.
But the Article 1, Section 13 has the therefore that Scalia had to infer for the Second Amendment.
Right.
It's explicit in the Virginia Constitution. We talk about a militia and so on. Therefore, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Right.
So it explicitly separates the prefatory justification from the operative clause. And it would seem that in state court, our Constitution doesn't have to follow the Second Amendment.
That's right. You're right about
So, I
that.
mean, it would seem that our venue would be the state court under Article 113, and forget about the Second Amendment. We have our own.
Yeah, well, a state court argument would be it would absolutely be, if we do that, there's been no state precedence of that. So we would essentially have to have a Heller reaffirmant from our Virginia Supreme Court saying that this means for the public, and then we'd have to have the Virginia Supreme Court come down and say, this is how Article 1, Section 13 differs from the Second Amendment, and this is why it's a stronger provision. It's never been done. It's never been done. But, I mean, it would at least be something we could argue. We're not going to get any help in the federal court. That's for darn sure. Unless Warman versus Healy comes down our favor.
What is your Facebook page?
Virginia Law Office.
What is it?
Virginia Law Office. One
That's your
word.
Facebook page, Virginia Law Office?
Yeah, one
Okay.
word, Virginia Law
Okay.
Office.
Thank you.
Vincent.
Oh, I got.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Does Senate Bill 16 include red flag laws?
No, the red flag laws, so, I did this whole thing about red flag laws, and if you don't know what they are, basically, very quickly, here's what's going to happen. And these are all over the country. If I think that you're acting crazy, I can go to the police and say, you're acting crazy. And then the police, on my testimony alone, I'm not a doctor, can come to your house, take your firearms from you, and then you have to go to court within a week or two, be evaluated by a doctor, and be cleared to have your firearms returned back to you. That's what the red flag laws basically are going to say. Now, the problem with the red flag laws are this, and you've got to know this, they're all over the place. Not one court in the entire nation has ruled them unconstitutional, and they've been challenged. Not one court. So there's a due process problem with it, but what they've done is they've reversed engineered the due process of somebody who's unstable having a firearm. And that's been reversed and re-engineered so that due process means I get the due process before I get the punishment, right? But they've reverse engineered it on this public policy exception. So those laws are likely, if they follow exactly like the Colorado model and the New England models, they're going to stick. And that's going to allow the police to come to your door and say, this petition's been filed, hand over your firearms, and if you don't, they can take you into custody.
Doesn't that kind of discriminate against poor people? They can't afford the lawyers and the...
Well, I mean, it would just, there's a congressman, a guy who's running for Congress against up on the peninsula against Bobby Scott, and he said, "What happens when they come and take your guns, and then next week we have a break-in, and I don't have a gun, and none of this was wrong? And what happens if the person who did this is hates my guns? Like my Democrat neighbor who hates guns, and they see me walking back and forth with my gun bag, and they don't like that, so they're just going to make up this argument. There's no check other than that person coming in and saying, I know Tim Anderson, I've known him for 5 years, and I can tell based on my knowledge that he's in some kind of a mental crisis, he's acting crazy, he's screaming, he's waving guns around. I think that he needs to be evaluated, period. And then that will allow the police to come in.
Can I tag into that?
Yeah, sure.
Everybody's worried about confiscation. No one's going to go door to door knocking on your doors to confiscate your weapons. That's how they're going to do it. They're going to wait for your wacky neighbor to call everybody out in their neighborhood that they ever saw carrying a rifle case. And that's how they're going to take your weapons, if it ever comes to that. I don't think it's going to get to that point, and certainly not anytime soon, so don't panic about it.
But it can be done anonymously.
Is there any penalty for filing a false? That's the problem with the red flag laws, is there is no penalty. There is a penalty for lying to the police, but the red flag laws themselves need to include making the person filing a false report a felon. So that's what it needs to come down to.
Somebody can call in a red flag on Dick Saplow.
Sure. and there's already a process for that. It's called squatting. It's already happened all over the country. It's very dangerous. People usually wind up getting shot when the police come in there expecting an opposing force. So I do want to tag on to what this gentleman said too. One of the things that's most important right now is you need to reach out to all your elected officials. You need to have everybody you know reach out to your elected officials. And you need to tell them, do not go to Richmond and compromise.
Because right now, I've received 2 phone calls from 2 different elected officials, and I'm not going to name them, who have asked me, hey, would the gun community swallow this? Would they accept this? And what they need to hear from every one of you right now, they need to hear it from your voice, is go up there and do not compromise, and if you lose every vote, we're still going to have your back.
Yes.
Because right now, they're thinking along the lines of, well, I need to save what I can save. Grandfather, exactly what Tim said. Grandfathering is bargaining your grandchildren's rights to save yours. They're trying to turn your grandkids' rights into currency. It's not what we need to do. If we lose every vote, we lose every vote, and then guys like Tim are going to take it to the courts, and that's where we're going to fight it.
Just one note. I don't know, it was about 2 months ago, a month and a half ago. We had Jason Mayeras in here, and he's discussed his red law bills. And we shot a lot of holes in it, and he said he was going to go back and readjust. We don't know what's going to happen there, but we want to know what's going to go on before this gets to Richmond. And we asked him to give us this information back. Well, we've not heard from him yet. So he did have some, we pointed out some issues with it, and he was supposed to take in consideration, especially if you have a very liberal judge that would willy-nilly, same thing that's going on with the Trump and
They'll create a system that just puts these things on a conveyor.
Right.
There's I don't know if much of you know how Virginia works, but basically it goes like this. January 13th, they go into session. It's a 60-day session, so this is over and done with by, April. Okay, so, or by March, April, absolutely, but like March 13th-ish is when they're going to be done. So it happens super fast. These, I talk 3 times a day sometimes on Facebook about what's been going on. When January 13th happens, you're going to see hundreds of bills be filed. And in fact, like there was a bill that we were looking at in the 2019 session, which was Bill 4027. So, and these bills go in numerical order. So you're going to see thousands of bills being thrown forward, and they're all going to get referred to committees, and they're going to get mixed in the pot. But I think when you see the Senate leader with Senate Bill 16, you know where he's at, and he's the leader, right? So we haven't seen any red flag bill laws wherever that came.
And what Tim just said is very important. It plays in a lobby day. A lot of people want to point at lobby day and say, how come it's on the 20th? They go back on the 8th. That's the process that makes lobby day still important, because they're not going to vote on the 19th on anything.
Crossover day is February 11th. Nothing's happened before
Right.
then.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
The thing about, I call it rock, paper, scissors. If they're gonna make all these people potential, because you only get called felon after you've been to court and you've been convicted, is that right?
Sure, yeah.
Then there's something called nullification,
Jury nullification.
where we, the people, are the paper over the rock.
Right.
And we are the ultimate say-so of what is considered a just law and not a just law. So I don't know if you wanted to.
We're not allowed to argue jury nullification as lawyers. It's unethical. Now you all may be able to do it as jurors, but I can't stand up next to you. He can't be my client and be like, hey, you really want to make this guy a felon? You can't do that as a lawyer. So
You can't even say that in
can't
court?
even say it.
Wow.
It's if he's violated the law, the jury has to the law will say you have to put him, you have to convict him.
Even
and you
though
have to,
some of our legislators and our governor have negated and nullified laws that they choose not to,
Double
I
standard,
think
right?
that's
Yeah,
hypocritical.
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, we have lobby day coming up, right? I generally like to email my representative and senator before I go and have a hard appointment so that I actually get to talk to them. Do you have any information available online or otherwise that would be a guideline of what to bring up when I get my 5 minutes or 10 minutes to actually speak to my delegate and senator?
I wouldn't worry too much about the Republicans because they have no voice.
I have one Republican, one Democrat.
I would try to just meet with the Democrat and just focus your time on them.
The Republicans still need to hear don't compromise.
Right, but
Yeah.
as far as,
And that can be done by email.
What would be a cogent argument to bring up?
Yeah.
Not all of us are, articulate.
I'll think about that and see if I can post something.
All right, that'd be great.
I think
This lady in the pink back here she's been had that hand up for quite a while.
I apologize.
A simple question on this felony business. If they go through with this and you become a felon, if you leave the state of Virginia and say go to North Carolina or another state, but you're a Virginia citizen, can they extradite you back, or how do they, or are you all right going to another state?
You mean if you were already convicted? Or?
Right, if I don't turn in my firearm and they tell me I'm a felon.
Oh, well, there'd be a warrant for your arrest in that scenario, and if you were stopped in another state, yeah, they would extradite somebody back on the felony, I'm sure. Did you have a question?
Yeah.
No, that's all right, that's right.
They, according to one of the consultants, in the SAS law, I'm sorry, I'll wait till the conversation finishes. Well, it's been loud day. According to the law, there is no compensation. I mean, according to the bill, there is no compensation.
Right. No buyback.
It's no buyback program. So I know someone asked about that question earlier. The second thing is, how has this been marketed the same way they did with illegal immigration? Because they were all for sanctuary cities for illegal immigration right here in the Commonwealth. And you know, the Attorney General said he would not, they would not uphold the federal statute, but now they want to uphold this one. So has there been a correlation in the marketing perspective for that? The second thing is, and you can handle both, and this might be a question for Vincent. Has the Trump administration, or how active are they in helping us try to get this resolved?
All right, so let me just break this one thing down because immigration comes up a lot. There's a federal case from the Supreme Court that says that states don't have to enforce federal laws. The locals don't. Okay, so the Supreme Court of the United States says that the local governments do not have to bear the financial burden of enforcing federal immigration rules. That's why sanctuary cities are illegal in the United States. When a local San Francisco says we're not going to enforce federal laws, the Supreme Court of the United States has allowed that to happen. Now, the bigger question of Governor Northam, we asked Governor Northam twice in the past 2 years to sign a law that says Virginia won't have sanctuary cities for immigration, and he said no both times to that. So, we asked him to, the Republicans said, please sign this bill. We don't want to see sanctuary cities pop up in Virginia. And he said, no, I want the ability to have sanctuary cities in Virginia if the localities want to do it. And now that the localities are doing it on firearm rights, they're like, oh, that has no effect. That doesn't mean anything. So that's the hypocrisy of our current administration. All right.
We need a 7-second.
Good, John.
Okay. Scenario. I take all my guns sometime in June and put them in a storage locker, inside a safe, inside a storage locker in West Virginia.
Sure.
Under somebody else's name.
No, you can keep it in your name. That's fine.
No, I mean under somebody else's name, so that there's no record that I have anything to do with that locker. Now, the police come to my house in July and say, you need to turn in all of your, assault firearms. And I say, nothing. I say nothing. They tear my house apart looking for firearms, right?
Sure. Well, they may if they have a search warrant. Sure.
Okay. And then they walk away, there are no firearms. Now what?
That's it. It's not illegal to own them. It's not illegal to own them. You just can't have them in the state. So you don't have to have them in somebody else's name.
They don't know that, because I'm not talking, they don't know whether they're in the state or not.
I mean, you have to be in possession of them to be guilty of the law.
So, what are the odds that when they walk away, they're dragging me with them in cuffs?
No, they won't. You wouldn't have committed a crime.
Okay.
It's just like cocaine.
Now,
if you had cocaine out there.
Okay, now, then go back to the red flag scenario. My guns are in this locker in West Virginia, and somebody red flags me. And they come to the door and say, hand over your firearms, and I do nothing. Now what?
It's whatever your firearms are in your possession.
There are no firearms, they're all in a locker.
It's the same analysis.
But they're in my possession, but they're in another state. But do they still drag me away in cuffs?
They're not in your possession if they're in another state. They're in your possession if they're in your immediate control.
Last question.
Physical possession.
But specifically, related to that, and specifically for a lawyer, if say I have a firearm that I bought last year from an FFL, okay, I went down to Superior and bought a gun that is about to become. All right, say I bought it from you. Say I bought it from you. Yeah. So anyway, I went and bought this gun legally. All right. The only record they have is that I bought it that day because we don't have to register them in Virginia currently. Now, they can prove that last August I was in possession of that gun. Is that probable cause for a search warrant that they have no proof that I own it now? I can say, no, I don't own it. All you can prove is that I owned it on that particular day.
Probable cause, they say in Virginia Beach is you could walk up with a ham and cheese sandwich to the magistrate to get probable cause. So probable cause to get a warrant to search, probably. It wouldn't take much. If somebody said that they saw you with the gun, that would be probable cause. And so,
But just going down to the gun shop and getting say they could get their records, that in itself is not probable cause because hey, he owned it one day last year is all they can really prove.
that you've owned it at some point, yeah. It's hard to say, and the resources to enforce this is again the conversation. So anyway, I think that he's ready to wrap up. Let me just say this. Go to the Libertarian Party of Virginia page, share it on your Facebook, tell people to donate. We are close. I mean, we raised 10 grand in 1 week. Share it. 20 people 500 times gets us over the top, and you all know enough people to get people to throw in $20. So get it up there so that it's fully vested, and we can get this hopefully filed before they go into session on January 13th. That's the goal.
And if you want to help support Tim, go down to Defensive Tactics, buy a gun.
Yeah, no.
He won't say it, but I will.
What was the gun you said to for?
That Remington 870 shotguns.
All right, and since he walked out with the camera running, I'm going to talk for just a minute. I know everybody wants to know what's going on in Virginia Beach.
Oh, but first, thank you.
Yes,
Tim,
thank
for
you.
All right, right now, Virginia Beach Council, they support having a vote, okay, for the most part. Everybody knows the 2 or 3 that don't. The problem is not an issue right now. The problem is a scheduling issue. Council is trying to find a date and a time that they can have a meeting to have a vote. It probably won't be on the 7th because of the planning items that are already on the agenda and already posted to be heard at that place at that time. They cannot change that, and they also can't have 5,000 people come in there and clog that up. They have to hear those items. So it's possible it may wind up being on a different date. It may be on the same date, late at night. You just got to give me some more time to figure that out. They are listening. Council is participating. Everybody thinks that they're ignoring the issue. They are not. They are participating in this. They want to get it to a vote. They just got to schedule.
So they might have a different venue?
Don't know yet.
Okay, that's still.
It is being discussed. I just don't know that it's possible. The problem with the different venue is, and we shouldn't ask the city to spend money on this. And if they go to a venue that they don't own, they've got to pay for it. They're trying to find a venue that the city owns that won't come at any cost to the city. It's all part of the scheduling issue.
Is there a concern of a delay tactic that may be in effect here?
There's no delay tactic in my mind, except maybe on the parts of 2 council members, and everybody knows which 2. The gentleman in the back's got his hand up for a while.
Are you confident that we'll have enough notice?
Oh, absolutely. You're required to have notice. I believe you're required to have 2 weeks' notice by city ordinance. Yeah, by charter. There was a hand over here.
Just, slipped out of my head.
I got a retort.
All right, well,
Okay, one more.
Give him a rhetorical answer.
okay.
I really want somebody to tell me what's going on, because this guy was a 40-year public servant, office holder in Virginia, and he knows nothing about his state, he knows nothing about his country and his constitution. I mean, this is the sort of thing that will cause deaths and possibly a civil war. I mean...
You talking about Saswell?
I am.
Yeah, that's a question for Tim. I'm focused right here at Virginia Beach. Tim's a statewide guy.
Yeah, but...
I'm going to leave you with a quote that I'm going to steal from a guy named David Durrett off my page. Is anybody against owning a gun? Everybody is pro-gun in the state and in the country. Some of us carry it. Other people make a phone call when they need it and have somebody bring it to them. They all own a gun. Okay? Thank you very much.
I got a question. I got a huge question.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So here's the deal. So
I got to come up with another quote to close out again now?
Yeah, no. Man, you got me. You've been getting them lately. So the question is is the next council race, will that be, I guess the Second Amendment, is that a big issue now? Is that something that that we can create a big issue. I mean, because going out to council the other night and seeing all those people there, it's like, man, where were y'all last year?
I can tell you that council was looking over at the windows and hearing the chants in the street, and I think that thought may have been on their mind. I can't tell you what they were thinking, but I know if I was sitting up there, I'd have been going, oh, wow.
Is it a semantics thing about what they want as their declaration, like Suffolk did, or?
I think that city council has followed very closely what happened in Chesapeake, not Suffolk. Suffolk's was so weak that you can't even really call it a sanctuary city.
Well, yeah, but.
Can't see
So,
our
and
mayor
I also
getting that
don't
in
want
front.
everybody to think that I'm trying to make the
Mayor
next
Chesapeake.
council elections a 2A issue. You know,
But it needs to be. It really does.
I disagree. We're running a city. We're not trying to. The council's not up there to determine constitutional issues. You know, they got a city. They got a budget to run, and I support John. If John Moss votes against this, I would probably still vote for him in the next election. I agree with 95% of the things the guy says. So don't judge these folks based on this one issue. Judge them on their record.
wrath for the true villains. My God, this is the one guy who would come here and talk to us.
No, and I'm with you on that. However, these liberals, what drives elections are one issues.
Yeah.
You know, or one issue. They're one issue people, and they come out in masses. And I'm sorry if I like to take apart from their playbook, but from apart from their playbook, that's how they win. That's why we have a liberal school board. That's why we have a liberal city council now. And I understand John's position, kind of explained it before, but the fact is, this does need to be an issue. You might need to make this one issue.
I agree, it needs to be a issue. I just don't think everybody should vote on this when there are severe issues around the city, the stormwater issues, the flooding issues, the sea level rise issues. Those are just as important.
Okay, we've got to close it out. Let's hear it for both Vince and our guest speaker, Tim. We have some important announcements to make, and one thing of business. If I could have everybody just hold it for one moment. The chair would entertain a motion from the floor that we expend a certain amount of funds to support this initiative up in Northern Virginia. Chair would entertain a motion.
I would like to propose a motion that we give at least $200 to this campaign out of our coffers.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, discussion. James.
What is our financial state right now?
Right now we have.
Amazing that you a bucket full of money, right? There you go.
All right, our current balance as of 30 November 2019, $1,009.92.
Whoa.
$1,000. Okay.
What expenses do we have coming
Not
up?
counting what's here.
Expenses coming up, none that I'm aware of.
The reason I'm asking is, can we go more than 200?
Yes, we can. That's part of the discussion, if you want to make a substitute motion or adjust
How
it.
about what's in there, plus the two?
The only, I'm not part of the group, but I would say if you are going to do something, try to do it through the main page so that it's tracked, with a credit card or something, so somebody have to pay with a credit card and get a refund.
Well, our treasurer, we've got a bank account
Okay,
there,
gotcha.
so
Yeah, just
we
try-
would make it to the state. Do you want to make a substitute motion on the amount?
Throw another number out.
Well, what are we doing with this?
300. Do we have a second for the 300?
Do we have a second? You want to, who made the motion? The
Ron,
substitute?
make a
Ron.
substitute motion that we donate $300 to the cause of road.
Okay. There's a substitute motion on the floor for $300 contribution. There's a motion and there's a second. Discussion.
$300 is a third of what John just
Yes.
told us about.
Okay. And we collected how much today, John?
I'm counting.
Okay. We'll have that number in the next meeting.
$60.
John?
Plus 5.
65.
65.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second for $300 check to the state. Hearing no further discussion, the chair will call for the question. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Here you go.
And there's some more money.
Whoa, petition.
Thank you so much.
How much is that?
All right, $100 bill.
Whoa.
So are we going to make it 400?
That's going to be 400 because that is earmarked. And not to be outdone, I'll match that one too.
Hey, don't start an auction now.
So 500. You want 500 going?
500, and I'll give you a check for that.
Hey!
No, I said,
First I'll make the
If Robert's not speaking for a week, I'll pay 1,000.
and
Do we have that on tape?
That'll never happen, so.
Tim, could you come up here for just one moment for a commercial announcement? Because we're still recording live.
All right.
Tell us where your store is on North Landing, the address, and what sort of discount you're going to get if you bring in a libertarian palm card.
Yes. So, I don't like to self-promote, I'm sorry, but defensive tactics in Virginia Beach, we sell everything at just a few dollars over cost. So I promise you that if you come in, you're going to get the best deal that we can give you there, 477-7126. But it's definitely not for that. I wanted to just show you guys one thing before you go. I just wanted to show you maybe we can get it on the camera. I'll screen it in. But if you go to the Libertarian Party of Virginia and you click on it and you look at the recall Senator Saslaw, we are at $10,330, and if you guys are giving $500, that's pretty close to $11,000. So pretty amazing stuff, guys. So and this is at Christmas too. So Merry Christmas, guys.
Thank you.
And we have candidates in the House. Here's my 100. You want to come up, Andy?
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm running for Congress, running against Elaine. It's time we get some real representation this time.
Elaine Fecketing?
No, not this Elaine.
I'm sorry.
Not that Elaine.
You're going to be the mayor of Sanbury?
So this past week, we saw great evidence of why we need a change in Congress, change our representative. Both the impeachment, which was crazy, the second article should be completely eliminated because the Supreme Court took the case showing that Congress doesn't get to decide just of itself, that the president has to comply. So just that by itself invalidates that article.
Well, they're in such a hurry.
Well, yeah, it's so urgent, but then we're not gonna, she's not gonna hand it off.
Yeah, I know.
So I'm running because I have 2 young kids, and when the founders made the Constitution, they said they were making it for themselves and for their posterity. And I'm really worried about us passing our country on to our posterity because we can't afford what we're doing. And the budget bill that is in front of the president now that has lots of advantages has a huge disadvantage in that it just increases the debt phenomenally. So we need a change, and I propose that I'm in that change. And so I'd be grateful for any help that you can give. Volunteering, contributing. The process is that I need to collect 1,000 signatures starting January 2nd up to March. If I am successful at that, then I'm on the primary ballot in June and then on to defeat Elaine in November. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy. Announcements from the floor. Diana, could you come up here, please? Because nobody can hear you from back there, that's why. And everybody likes to see
I like
you.
hearing your hips creak when you walk.
Hi, I'm Diana Howard. I'm the chair of the Virginia Beach Tea Party. And we're having our next meeting January 2nd. So if you want to bring your petition and get it signed January 2nd, please come. We're having Mike Shea from the planning department come and do the next comprehensive plan. Now, I know Second Amendment is a big deal, but in Virginia Beach, right, everything's guided by the comprehensive plan. We're redoing it because the last plan was on strategic growth areas on light rail. So
This one has
it was all
flying
dependent
cars.
on that, yeah. So we have to get this plan right, otherwise that's going to be coming back, and the Planning Commission will have to enforce that. So come on out, and anybody who's running for office, Daniel Gade may be there that night. He's going to try and be here. He's going to be here the first week of January, so he's going to try and come to our meeting. Any other candidates that are running, you can come and speak as well and bring your petitions, and we'd be glad to sign any petition for anybody to run. 7 o'clock, Thursday night, January 2nd, 5345 Marion Lane at Marion Manor in the Terrace Room.
Thank you, Diane.
And if you're not a member, bring $10 and join us.
The next meeting coming up for the Tidewater Libertarian Party is the first Saturday in January. I'm trying to put together now a quasi-debate between Dr. Bill Duke, George Mears, and David Basco, formerly of Old Dominion University, who's a champion of sea level rise and all that. So we'll get something going on that. The third Saturday, Ben Loyola, who is running for Congress, he will be the guest speaker here on that Saturday. Then this afternoon, there's this very special party that's going to happen at 6 o'clock.
It's a blanket party for you?
It's a blanket party, yes. I haven't had one of those since Paris out. One of our own, Laura Hughes, her daughter, which I think everybody knows, Jordan, she is turning 20 years old. And we're going to have a party at
Senor Fox.
Senor Fox. Senor Fox. It's over on, what street's it on?
I don't know, it's near
It's Nemo Parkway on Upton. I think it's on Upton. Yeah. Just look it up. Nemo Parkway, just across from Red Robin. 6 o'clock.
Where is it again, please?
Right, it's called Senor, S-E-N-O-R, Fox.
They have a jalapeno margarita.
Yes, jalapeno margaritas that are plain
Nemo Parkway.
So,
know where the Red Robin is?
we've got a cake for it and everything else, so everybody pretty much is invited. You don't have to bring any gifts or anything. What? No, you don't need any of that. Just show up. Just show up, and Elaine Feckety's paying for everything.
Yes.
6 o'clock tonight. So, Merry Christmas to each and every one of you, and may the spirits of the birth of Jesus the Christ be with you and yours, except for Bill Duke, because he was talking while I'm talking about God. So, but thank you all very much for your work for freedom, and we're going to continue this push through next year, which is going to be hopefully a glorious year. And I'd like to say a very special blessing from the Lord on every one of you who may know someone or a family member who may be suffering from some sort of illness, whatever it may be. We ask the Lord to please bless them and heal them. And thank you all very much. You all are great Americans, and I mean that sincerely. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, one other question. Oh, Laura Hughes, school board update.
So, we are, clearly Vicki Carroll and Weems and I are embattled regularly. We now have people filing formal complaints because they don't like who we're supporting in elections. And so the school board has set up a governance committee that will decide how to discipline us. Even though there's nothing in state code that authorizes one elected official to discipline another official. And it would be a de facto disciplinary action anyway, which is typically frowned upon. We would love to have people come speak at school board meetings and explain how reasonable it seems to set up a governance committee to go back and discipline elected officials who just don't agree with you. We've had elected officials file complaints because we disagree with the majority when we're voting, because we should just be blindly supporting them. I don't think any reasonable people want any elected official to just blindly support a policy because that's what the majority wants. And we would love to have people send emails, write letters, speak at school board meetings, and we would appreciate any kind of support you can offer.
When is the next school board?
The school board meetings are the 2nd and 4th Tuesdays of the month. The next one will be January 14th. There's also an election coming up in November. Vicki will be up for re-election, and we're hoping to replace a few school board members that seem to have this mindset of discipline anyone who disagrees with me. So we could use some help gathering signatures, working polls, that sort of thing. So please reach out. I would love to get you involved with doing that.
At the same time, aren't they lowering the discipline in the schools?
They are absolutely lowering the discipline in the schools. I had a mother call me because her middle school son, her 11-year-old son, had a little girl, a middle school little girl, bullying him since the beginning of the school year. He reported it to a teacher, and nothing was done. So, not this past Wednesday, the one before, they released the walkers. He's one of the walkers. They released them. They're supposed to leave school grounds immediately. However, some of the children lingered on the playground, and he was on the tire swing. And this little girl yanked him off the tire swing. As he was trying to stand up again, she grabbed him by the head, slammed it into the pole. He had to be taken to CHKD as a concussion and a brain bleed. It will be January 22nd before the doctor lets him know whether he's cleared to go back to school. He's very seriously hurt. And the response from the school is, we're taking appropriate disciplinary action. One said it wasn't that serious. And one email from someone in central administration said, this type of rhetoric is one of the reasons why we're having a teacher shortage. This little boy's really seriously hurt, and this bullying was not handled. So this mother is incredibly upset. There was a disciplinary hearing a few months ago where a middle schooler sexually assaulted another student. The video was 45 minutes long. It was on a bus. Nobody did anything. They kept making the stops. And so that tells me that this is normalized. Yes. 45 minutes is how long the video went. And nothing, you know.
Can I add to that? My wife teaches in the school system, and from my take on it, a big problem is that whenever any employee's performance evaluation is tied to disciplinary statistics, there is a push to keep the disciplinary statistics down.
Absolutely.
That tie needs to be completely severed.
Yep, you're right.
Yes. The school system wants to keep SOL numbers high, discipline numbers low, and they don't care how they get them. And the children are the collateral damage on this. We also had a letter from a young lady, a freshman in college, who graduated from Virginia Beach schools, and she is furious to get into college and find out that they don't get do-overs, that she has to take remedial reading, because she wasn't prepared for that. I mean, you can't do that for the first time when you're 18. She thought, but nobody told her that. And so she's completely unprepared, and she's angry. She said, her letter to us said that Virginia Beach schools did not prepare her for college. That's a problem.
I'm glad she did that.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. As far as the remedial reading, a prime example is standing right here in the doorway. Eric Ray.
That $1,000 thing still stands. If Robert can shut up for a month, I will give $1,000.
Merry Christmas, everybody. Merry Christmas.